Hello everyone, Shreyats here. Welcome to episode 2 of this mini series where we are building a custom URL shortener, something similar to Bitly. In the first video, we worked on the backend for this application where we would send the long URL and get like the shortened URL along with the long URL. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to build the front end for this application. So the front end is going to be relatively simple and we're going to be using ReactJS for it. So without further ado, let's go into the laptop or move to the laptop and see how to implement this. Like I did in the first video, in this video also I've gone ahead and uploaded the same codebase you see over here to my GitHub repository. I've also updated the README in my GitHub repository so you know what steps you need to take in order to be on the same page that I am. In this video, we are going to be doing 4 main steps. First is to create a couple of state variables. Then we would want to complete our handle form submit for interacting with our backend application. Then step 3 would be to write some code in a return statement to complete the application without having any errors. And lastly, we would want to display all the URLs that we have shortened into the UI. So now step 1 is to create like the state variables. In our case, we would need 2 state variables. So the first one would be a string variable to hold the long URL that we're going to give. So I'll just call it as long URL, set long URL, which will be equal to react.useState of an empty string. The next one would be an array we would need for displaying all the URLs that we have shortened. So I'm just going to call this as all URLs, and then again it will be set all URLs is equal to react.useState of an empty array. Now that we have our state variables in place, we can go ahead and complete the handle form submit. Over here, the first thing we would do is we'd call e.prevent default, and this is to ensure that the web page is not re-rendered when we are sending data from our form to our backend application. After this, we would want to check whether our long URLs are not empty and they have some value. So what we would do is we'll do an if statement with long URL is it equal to empty or long URL dot trim. If that's also equal to an empty string, then what we would do is we'll do a window dot alert saying long URL is required. If our long URL is not empty, that means we have value and we can send it to our backend for processing. So now that we have an if statement, we'll go ahead and define an else block where we'll write the code over here. What we will do is we'll create an object that will be sending to our backend application through the body. So we'll do it as var request body is equal to a JSON object, which would be long URL. We'll put colon long URL, and this is the body that will be sending to our backend. After this, what we would do is we would do an axios.post, and then we would basically call our backend endpoint over here. So it will be http://localhost 4000 /shorten-url, and then we will put comma, and over here we'll be sending the request body to our backend. After this, what we would want to do is we would want to put a .then block and then give it a value. So let's just call it as RESP for response. And over here, we'll call the set all URLs. We'll open an array, we'll do triple dots, and then we'll call all URLs. And onto that, we're going to be appending our response.data, which would contain the ID, long URL, original URL, which will be showcasing in our UI. After this, since we have a .then, we would also do a .catch. So if we get any error, for now we would just console.log our error, so we can do debugging if we hit this point. Now that we have completed our handle form submit, we can go ahead to our return statement. In our return statement, what we're going to do is on line 47 where we have value, we are going to remove the 2 curly braces that we have on the inside, and we are just going to call long URL over here. And in the value on change, what we're going to do is we're going to call set long URL, and then we are going to pass in e.target.value. Now we are going to complete the on key down, and this is basically used for when the user hits the return button or enter button, we would want to submit the form. So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to call an if statement. So if e dot key is triple equal to the enter key, then what we're going to do is we're going to make a call to handle form submit. So we will just do handle form submit. After that, the last thing we would need to do is complete the on-click handler for our button. In this case, it's again going to be very similar to how we did it for the on key down. So you can just copy line 52 and you can just paste it within the curly braces for the on-click. Now that we have completed the on-click and our input method as well, we can go ahead and write the code to display all the URLs that we have in the UI. So in order to do this, if you see on the left hand side, there's something called as components, and if you expand that, there's a URL card. So this is the card that we're going to be using to display all the URLs that we have shortened. So the way we are going to do this in ReactJS is we are going to open a curly braces and then we're going to call all URLs.map. So since all URLs is an array, we are going to basically map through it, get each of the values and display it in the UI. So we do all URLs.map. We give this a value. So let's just say URL. We'll start an arrow function and then we'll open and close a parentheses. And over here, what we would do is we would call URL cards and then we would need to pass a property. So we'll call URL object and this would basically be the URL. And if you see in the URL card, we are passing URL object, which we are using for accessing all the objects within this URL. So now that we have completed the front end, let's go ahead and run the application to see how it works and whether we have to make any other fixes. So for that, what you can do is you can open up the inbuilt Visual Studio Code terminal and then you can do a cd to backend and then you can do an npm start on the backend to start our backend server, which will run on localhost 4000. And to run the front end, you just do cd client and then you can do an npm start. This will go ahead and start the React application and it will automatically open up a browser. Once it's opened up in the browser, we are going to see a UI that looks something like this. So let's go ahead and type in a long URL. So let's say we go to go.dev. Let's copy this. We'll paste it in the go.dev and hit submit. And as you can see, we have sent the data to our backend and this is the shortened URL. This is the original URL. So now we can hit the first button on the right hand side, which will open it up in a new tab. So as you can see, it went ahead and opened it up to go.dev. And if you want to ensure it's actually working, we can copy this, open a new tab, paste that, and of course it redirects us to the original URL. That concludes this video and this series. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with anyone you think who might find it interesting. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.